Thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute with this update on the work of the AOAC International Task Force on Food Fraud via this vehicle. This short presentation aims at providing you with a quick overview on what the Task Force of AOAC International on Food Fraud was trying to achieve, its latest recommendations, and the next steps as to the work that the organization intends to pursue in this area. As you may recall, AOAC International decided the creation of a special task force on food fraud in the summer of 2017 with the intent to channel the organization leadership and convening power towards addressing the analytical requirements of food fraud, meaning to support stakeholders in identifying the suitable methods for their testing in the context of preventing and addressing food fraud incidents. What we're trying to achieve specifically is to look at aspects of method availability and method standardization. Now, this work was underway in a context where food fraud was not defined internationally according to an agreed upon definition, but that was not necessarily a deterrent because there is a common understanding of what food fraud incidents are and how they can be differentiated from other, let's call them regular food safety incidents. Well, first of all, a food fraud incident is a deliberate act. Its main objective is economic gain in an illicit manner. A food fraud incident is also meant to be concealed and not meant to be discovered. And generally, there is an intent on the part of the fraudster to misrepresent a food product or a food ingredient to consumers, whether be it by changing its composition or by altering simply its representation. Now, there is one regulatory definition, or what is close to a regulatory definition, that the US Food and Drug Administration has adopted in the context of defining economically motivated adulteration, which can be considered as a subset of food fraud because it touches upon the alteration of the composition of the product. And the working definition that has been applied is the fraudulent intentional substitution or addition of a substance in a product for the purpose of increasing the apparent value of the product or reducing the cost of its production, meaning for economic gain. Now, even though there wasn't an agreed upon definition at the international level, the Task Force on Food Fraud actually pursued its investigation of where the organization can play a leading role in the area of methods availability and method standardization. The AOAC task force met a couple of times, mostly using remote meetings, but also using one physical meeting in the context of the last mid-year meeting in March of 2018. The recommendations were that there's definitely a role for AOAC to play in this particular context, and identified two specific areas of action for methods and for testing. The area of non-targeted testing, essentially those are the methods that are used to support authenticity assurance for a given food or ingredient without necessarily targeting a specific adulterant. So those are methods that rely on the characteristics of a product and the signature of these characteristics without targeting an adulterant. There is a second type of methods that are applied in the context of food fraud testing, and those are methods used in what we call targeted testing. Now, in this particular case, the adulterant is known and therefore targeted by a methodology in the matrix of the ingredient of the food product. And the example would be melamine as an adulterant in milk products. What the AOAC task force recommended was the creation of two working groups that could address these specific aspects because they will have their specificities as far as method standardization is concerned. Now, the non-targeted testing working group identified the need for the development of standards, methods, performance requirement, or SMPRs for these methods that could be used in the context of prevention and early detection of food fraud incidents. And there was a recommendation made by the task force that this working group be co-chaired by Dr. John Spilka. The targeted testing working group identified for itself the need to map existing methodologies and their status. There may be already methods that were validated, including according to AOAC requirements, and that could be put into use in the context of targeted testing, in the context of food fraud incidents. This area also may be in need of identifying the priorities of action for method development for specific adulterants that can find their way into some ingredients or into some products, but also to looking at what AOAC International can do in terms of addressing its own processes so that it is able to better respond to food fraud incident with a better and a higher level of speed and reaction. And this particular working group, there was a recommendation made that it be co-chaired by Dr. Joe Boyson. Now that the task force, in fact, identified with more clarity where AOAC International can shape its work forward for the upcoming period, the AOAC Board of Directors discussed and considered that the main objectives of the task force upon its creation were in fact achieved, and as a result, the task force no longer needs to exist in the form of a special task force. Rather, that food fraud related activities and the methodology requirement for the specific issue can be tackled within regular AOAC initiatives. Now, as a result, the two working groups that I've just mentioned will start convening and actually looking at their area of action using the momentum of this meeting, of our annual meeting on Tuesday of the 28th of August from 1 to 3 p.m. Meeting is organized by AOAC International in the Civic North room and will be chaired by Deborah McKenzie, the Senior Director for AOAC Standardization of Methods. And this is essentially the proposed agenda for these working group meetings. Of course, looking at AOAC policy documents and reviewing those and how essentially AOAC's work could be put into action to address the issues of food fraud. Also, we will hear from our two co-chairs, John Spilka and Joe Boyson, on the way they see and they present the future work of the two working groups. And hopefully we will have a discussion amongst the stakeholders that are present on their interest in joining the working groups, but also in the way they could contribute in shaping the future action of these working groups. So I hope that you will join us on the 28th of August to have this discussion with Deborah McKenzie and our co-chairs. Now, in the meantime, AOAC International will continue its international engagement and its presence in a number of meetings where food fraud is the focus. And as a result, in fact, AOAC International plans to be one of the partners and to leverage one of the international events to be held in the fall of 2018, specifically between the October 28th and October 30th in Dubai during the Dubai International Food Safety Conference, where essentially the discussion of methodologies and perhaps actually supporting the activities of the working groups will be organized as part of this specific event. And I hope that you consider joining this event. Foodsafetydubai.com is the link that you can look into if you would like to have more information on this specific event. Once again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this update via this means. I regret for my inability to be with you in person due to situations and circumstances that I could not overcome. And I wish you a great meeting and a great set of discussions.